Okay, on the screen is what is let's go back. This is the top of Lamed Tes Amud Lamed Ches Amud Beis. Really, the Gemara stops on Lamed Ches Amud Aleph, but it's not on the screen. We did it already, so I'll just say the what's it called to recap the Gemara that's on the Amud Aleph. The Gemara said, the Mishnah said about Tchumen, the whole subject case all about Tchumen, and not only people have Tchumen, also the objects, their belongings also are obligated to the Tchum of the owner. And it spoke about a case of someone made a bread, and they had the flour, but they had to borrow water or spices and salt. And Rashi says not only is talking about a loaf of bread, also a pot, dish or something, and you're getting spices from somebody else. So the Mishnah says that you're obligated to all of the owners. So even though you have the flour, but since you took water from somebody else or spices, whatever it might be, so you can't take this loaf of bread or this pot of food, this meat, out of the tchum that the owner of the water or the spices was, because he's also a shutef in the product and the end product, and therefore you're obligated to all of the owners, and you're limited to the tchum that everybody's allowed to go to. I viewed the argument in the Mishnah and said that the water is an exception because the water evaporates, you don't see it anymore, and it's not nikah. But that we'll get back to that later. But the Gemara's kasha was we started about 5 lines on the Amud Aleph, and over there it said that Rabbi Abba, when he came to Israel, he davened that he should say something that is accepted upon the listeners, but it didn't work out. We see the story was that it didn't work. What happened over there was when he came to Israel, so with three chachamim, there was a question of what the gersa was over here. Either was it Yochanan, Rav Papi, Rav Zera, or was it Rav Avo, Rav Shimra, Rav Pazi, Rav Yitzchak, and Nafacha. Three chachamim, they had a question on the Mishnah. How come you don't say bittul berov? How come you don't say that the minority, if let's say the flour and the water, you have more flour than water, or more flour than the salt, whatever it might be, the meat is more than the spices. So how come you don't say that it becomes batel? And I don't care about the owner of the water, not because of this word that it's not nikah. The fact that it's batel b'miyut. How come you don't say that it becomes nullified in the majority, and it shouldn't be considered significant, and we should not consider the tchum of the owner of the spices? That was this kasha. That was the kasha of the chachamim. Rav Abba, he wanted to say something he thought made sense, and he said that you don't lose your ownership just because bittul works by yisurim to make something that's usher, so then it loses the status, its significance, and it's not usher. It doesn't have its identity. It loses its identity, it doesn't become usher. But ownership value doesn't get lost because of bittul. And he gave an example that he thought is a good example, like he says in the top line, that if somebody has a kilo, let's say, of wheat that got mixed up into 10 kilo of somebody else's wheat, then the guy says, where's my wheat? You pay me for a kilo of wheat that got mixed into yours. So he's going to say that it's batel, it became batel, and it's not here, and he can go on his merry way. So he thought that that's a good answer, that money doesn't become batel, and since money doesn't become batel, so he thought over here also that the owner of the spices, the owner of the water, since it's value, so he doesn't lose his ownership, and you don't say batel over there. But they laughed, like it says in the second line, and he said, did I do something to you? Like, what are you laughing for? And they laughed a second time. They didn't think that he said a smart thing. And Rav Ashaya agreed to the laughers, like it says in the 4th line, Rav Ashaya Shapra Abba Dachichole, they're right, that he said something that doesn't make sense. And he said that you yourself, Abba, maybe wasn't talking to him, but he said he wasn't there maybe, but it sounds like he was saying that Rabbi himself, who asked the question, he only asked about chitim and chitim. Why didn't he go on further to talk about chitim and sorim, that if wheat got mixed into barley, one person's 1 kilo of wheat got mixed into somebody else's 10 kilo of barley, how come over there you don't say the same thing? Abba should have said, if you really meant what he's saying, so he should have said, are you going to say that it becomes batel? And he also didn't venture to say, over there, are you going to say that as batel? Because it really is batel. There's a question about min b'mino, min b'sheno mino. And yes, last time Rabbi Les asked that if you could notice the chitim and the son, you could discern, so surely it's not batel. Anytime you have something which is discernible, it's not batel. But the proportion to someone that it was ground up. You had ground wheat and ground barley. You can't tell the difference. You can't separate it. But it's min b'sheno mino. It's 2 different types, and over there, everybody holds that it is batel. And he's saying to Rav Moshe, not that Rav Moshe was saying to Rabbi Abba, not that he said directly to him, but he said according to your logic, he should have even said if wheat got mixed into barley also, he should be able to demand back, give me the value of a kilo of barley that got mixed up. And over there, even Rav Abba also didn't venture to say, are you going to say that it's batel? Because it is batel. So he's also on the side of the laughers, we'll call them, the three people, the three Amorim that laughed. And Rav Moshe also saying that they're right for laughing. Because yes, the ownership also gets batal. That's what they seem to say, that when you have real hilchos bittul, the case you said wasn't a good case because chitim and chitim is min b'mino. Min b'mino, some hold is not batal. But the ones hold that it is batal, even min b'mino. So then, they're taking the side that even by financial matters, also bittul nullifies it. It's not here. And the person who lost it, like he fell into the ocean, he says, "I'm sorry. What can I do for you?" It's not. It lost its identity. So the issue of the Gemara seems to be if you say bittul by mominus, you say bittul by monetary things. We know you do say bittul by yisurim to nullify an issa. We know you say bittul also by tumma. If something which is tummy got nullified and something which is not tummy also, it loses its identity. But the question of our Gemara is, does monetary value also lose its identity when it falls into bittul? And here the case is that one person's wheat fell into somebody else, wheat flour fell into somebody else's barley flour. Does he lose it? He's saying that the owner of the 10 kilo of barley flour says, "I'm sorry, your wheat got lost. And what should I do for you? I don't owe you anything." That's the question. That's what we're holding. So to continue. Rav Safra on top line here is Amalei Rav Safra. It's how far is it in the Gemara? The last one on the line is Safra. The last one on the line. You have that?
Yes.
Amalei Rav Safra. Moshe Shapir Kamrit. So Rav Safra's talking, seems to Rav Oshaya, and he calls him Moshe. And it's many times in the Shas, I think Rav Safra always says Moshe Shapir Kamrit. It's an expression. It means like, what does Moshe mean? So Moshe is Moshe Rabbeinu. But he's calling him Moshe Rabbeinu. Why is he calling him that? So Rashi always says different pshat because it means Gadol Ador, or it means I forgot the other pshat. And Rashi over here says like he's swearing by Moshe Rabbeinu. He's swearing by the honor of Moshe Rabbeinu. Are you saying good? Means Rav Safra is going to challenge Rav Oshaya. So Rav Safra seems to be on the side of Rabbi Abba. Rabbi Abba is the one who said he's the one who thought he had a good answer that money is not batal, and Rav Safra is taking his side. So we have, just to get the lineup, we have the three Chachamim and Rav Oshaya who agreed to them. And they said that money also is batal. And therefore the question was that the one who owns the spices shouldn't answer with the trumin because the spices became batal in the food or the water in the flour. And you have another side of the list is going to be Rabbi Abba and Rav Safra. Rav Safra is taking Rav Abba's side and said that money doesn't get batal. So Rav Safra is going to ask Rav Oshaya, Moshe, are you saying good? You think that money is batal? The monetary value is also batal? Didn't they hear what Rav Chia Katusva, I don't know what that is, name of a place, that said in the name of Rav, the following halacha. Somebody had a granary of chitim, of wheat. And the halacha is that if you have wheat, so by nature, when you collect wheat, so some pebbles get mixed in, some solas gets mixed in also. So are you allowed to sell it for the price of wheat? It's everyone knows. Like you go to the fruit store, and there's some fruit that have some onions, let's say, they have some mud on it. So could he put the whole thing on the scale? The halacha is yes, you're allowed to put it on the scale. So he's charging you the price of onions for mud. So that's the halacha that is considered, whatever is considered normal. If there's a big clump of earth, then you say, I'm sorry, I didn't buy mud, I bought onions. So you can take that off. But whatever is considered the normal solas that comes with it, so then it's understood, then he's allowed to sell the regular price. So I gave an example about onions with some mud. The same thing is talking about chitim with strawberries. In the natural granary, when they did it, maybe nowadays it's different with all the machinery they have, but the way they used to collect the wheat. So sometimes they'd have the chitim together with pebbles. And you're allowed to sell it. You sell it by the kilo, by the bushel, even though you don't have to clean it out in order to be honest. You could be honest and say, this is nature, and there's some soros over there. So you could have gotten the full price of chitim for your wheat, which is mixed in with some pebbles. Somebody came and he cleaned out all the pebbles. Somebody else, a stranger came and cleaned out the pebbles. So he caused the loss to the owner of the wheat because till now the pebbles were worth money to him because now you're not allowed to, you're not allowed to do. You're not allowed to throw in pebbles into the wheat and say this is a normal amount, a percentage, 1%, whatever it is, it comes with pebbles. You're not allowed to do that. If it comes naturally as you picked it, then you're allowed to sell it like that. But you can't throw pebbles into clean wheat. So this person who cleaned it out, he was mazik. He was mazik, the owner of the wheat. So that's what it says over here. If somebody selected out all of the pebbles from somebody else's granary, he has to pay him the value of wheat. The owner of the wheat says these pebbles are worth wheat to me. So what does he mean to say? Even though he's saying that according to your asvara, you are bonim that are saying that value becomes batal. So these strawberries also should have become batal. It's true that it was worth money, but if you talk about bittul, so that strawberries, these pebbles that are worthless and should become insignificant in comparison to the wheat, and therefore the halacha should be that it's not there. It should be batal. Kila chasre. The word kila is a measurement. It's Aramaic for the word measurement. This word kila. Kila chasre. He made him lose the kila. He made him lose a measurement, and he has to pay for that. So the Gemara wants to prove, Rabbi Safra thought that he had a proof from this halacha of Rav that money is not batal. The same way that Rav held that money doesn't become, the monetary value doesn't become batal. It's even though you're right that rose is pebbles, it should become batal in the tefillah, but since it has value to the owner, value doesn't become batal. So he thought that he has a proof to Rabba that monetary value does not get batal. The words of the Gemara, some take out the next four words. Over here also, he's taking away from him a measurement. So those words don't fit so well. Some take it out. They say some take the gears shouldn't be, because here we're not talking about make anybody lose. That's only an example over there by somebody cleaned out the pebbles. That's an example of making somebody lose. He took away here we're talking about the issue of tchumen over here. We're back to the tchumen that somebody has flour and he took the spices from somebody, water. So he wants to know if that owner has is still present over here, even though it should become batal with the regular halachas, it should become batal. But the ownership, the value doesn't become batal. So the last four words, the comparison is not accurate. Where's Achanami Kila Chasre? The last one on the line is Achanami Kila. So those four words, Achanami Kila Chasre, some take out because the comparison to Agamor is not about being mazik. He's bringing it from the source where it says that Boris over there, you see that it's a din of mazik, and you see that it doesn't become batal. So here too, but here too should be Achanami. We should say that the owner of the spices and the water still has significance, and it should have the halachas of tchumen. So we're holding by machlokes if monetary value becomes batal. By our halacha, the significance is talking about if it has halachas tchumen. If the owner of the spices and the water is here, it's considered that it's existing, and it's going to also limit the product to be able to take it out of the tchum, or as this chacham wanted to say that it becomes batal and you're allowed to ignore it and take it to the tchum of the owner of the flour. That's the subject. And Rav Safra was on the side of Rabbi Abba. Amalei Abaye, top line over here, roll up. Amalei Abaye. Abaye is also on the side of we'll call them the lefers, the three chachamim, and Rabbi Oshia also was on that side. Abaye is also on that side, and he's taking the side of those who hold that it is, but that money also becomes batal, monetary value also becomes batal, and the kasha is a good kasha, that the tchum shouldn't be affected by the owner of the water and the spices. And even though you have a kasha here about these pebbles that are mixed into the teruah, that over there you don't say it's batal, Abai wants to answer the kasha. Although Shani Leilamar, you of Safra don't have a difference between Maman Sheish Tovin and Maman Shein Tovin, is there no difference if the money has demanders or doesn't have demanders? Means the case of the teruah, if somebody had grain in his granary and had pebbles that he was allowed to sell it for the full value of teruah, even though it had some pebbles mixed in, and somebody came and cleaned out all the pebbles, so he made him a loss. He caused him a loss because now I have to sell clean teruah. I'm losing out that extra percentage, whatever it might be, 1%, 2% of pebbles that were mixed in. I can't put it back in again, so he caused me a loss. That's called Maman Sheish Lo Tovin. That money, those pebbles, has somebody who's demanding the value. The owner of the teruah is Toveya. He's asking you took away my money. So Abaye says, why is it Sdom? Where's Sdom? Which one is this Sdom? You have to explain which side. The
guy's trying to attack somebody's produce.
What do you mean? He came into my fruit store and he cleans off all the onions, and now I have to sell the onions only no mud on them. I could have sold them legally. No, there's no reason why he did a avla. He did an avla because he did an avla to the person. He's allowed to sell. It's normal. It's normal packaging.
What's the name?
It's normal to have some mud on the onions. So you're allowed to sell it. You put it on the scale, and you get money for the onions. If it's true that there's mud, you're not allowed to put the mud on. You're not allowed to add on mud at night when nobody's looking. But it comes out of the ground with some mud, and that's considered, everyone understands that there's mud on the onions, and you're allowed to sell it for the price of onions. You don't have to clean it up each time. This person came, and he's a big tzaddik in somebody else's cheshbon. If he wants to sell his own onions like that, let him do it on his own. But he goes to somebody else's food store, and he takes off all the mud, and then he says, okay, now sell.
He's buying 10 kilos of his friend. He's the shaliach for his friend's onions.
You're not allowed to do that. The buyer also not allowed to do that.
To give him a nice,
no, he's doing it on the expense of the seller. He's not allowed to do that. He's being a tzaddik on somebody else's cheshbon.
I totally understand that.
He takes all the things from the bananas. He uses it for that. So the peels. Do you know how much the peel he weighs just of the banana?
Yeah, and that's considered no. So that's a normal. That's normal. If you don't want it, so you go home and you clean it off. But you can't say that I want to get only the fruit part. That's how it comes. It comes in a packaging. The packaging is the peel. The packaging is also some mud that's attached to it. It's normal. You didn't put it on. You're right that if the person is going to go, the owner of the store, he's going to at night when no one's looking, he's going to put some mud onto his onions. So
that's
going
where the Sidon.
Okay, that you're not allowed to. That's no. So that's gezel. That's gezel. But he's not doing that. He's an innocent man. He goes to the field, picks out onions. He doesn't, and a certain amount of mud stays on it. You're allowed to sell it like that. So the person who cleaned it out, he's doing an avla. He's stealing from the store owner. So that's halacha. And but the Gemara says over there, I understand everyone agrees because there's mamash sheish lo tovin. That means the person, the owner of the granary over here, he's demanding the money. He says, "This is my money. You'll mazik me." But over here, there's mamash shein lo tovin. Here, nobody's demanding it. What does that mean? So I would say that the simple pshat might be just the. I'm agreeing. I'm going to say what Rashi says, but you can say over here that the person who gave water or he gave some spices could be the lady's not even going to ask for it. There's on Yantif you made a bread and you had flour, but you needed some water. So you went to your next door neighbor and you got some water, you put it into your flour, you made a bread. So you had made an Erev Tchumen to go down the road, but you can't go with this piece of bread because this bread that you have is limited also to the Tchum of the owner of the water, because you borrowed it on Yantif. On Yantif, when Yantif came in, the water was in the domain, in the ownership of the next door neighbor, and they did not make an Erev Tchumen. So the water, like we said, that just like the person is limited to the Tchum, so also his objects, all his ownership. So
bring the water back.
So the water can go out of the tchum, and even though you put it into your bread, but it's still there. The bread, the water, the spices, the salt. That's the subject of our Mishnah. The question was, why don't you say that it becomes batel? And the whole discussion of the Gemara is that maybe ownership doesn't become batel, monetary value doesn't become batel. That's the whole subject that Rabbi was talking about. The Chachamim held, these three Chachamim held that it does become batel. Rabbi said that it does not. Rav Shai said that he took the side of the Chachamim that it is batel. Rav Safra said that it's not. Abai is also taking the side of the Chacham that hold that it is batel. And he's saying that even though you prove by this case of the Tzoros that monetary value doesn't become batel, that's because somebody's demanding the money. But over here, by the case of the bread with the water and the spices and the salt, the owner of the spices and salt is not demanding the money. There's no demand. So I could say that they gave it for free. They don't plan on taking it back anymore. Rashi says even if they do plan on demanding it back, then tomorrow. But today, you borrowed it for today. Tomorrow you'll pay me back spices. But this money is considered right, not mamash shein lo tovin, and therefore should become batel. Abai is taking the side of those chachamim that say that the spices and the water and the salt should become batel, and it shouldn't restrict the owner of the one who made the bread to take it out of the tchum. So it's a kasha on the Mishnah. The Mishnah is asking kasha on the Mishnah. The Mishnah says that it is limited by the owner of the spices and the water and the salt, and they're asking that no, it should become batel. Then that's what we're holding now. Amalei ulatamech. This next Gemara is very, very, very difficult, and all the Mepharshim have difficulty with it. There probably is some Gersa confusion over here, that the way it says in our Gemara is very difficult. The Pnei Yeshua, I saw on the art scroll, I was looking for some shot, they said the Pnei Yeshua says that this Gemara is a Sefer Chasun. It's like a sealed book. Like even the Pnei Yeshua said, like once Pnei Yeshua says something like that, so it's a hard Gemara. So I'll just read it. The problem with this Gemara is going to be that Rav Safra is talking now. Rav Safra is on the side that says that he took the side of Rabbi that it's not batel. He's really presenting the side, the position that money is not batel. And what he's going to say now is that it is batel. So that doesn't make sense. So he says the kasha and they say pshat. I'm just going to read the Gemara and I don't understand it. So this is supposed to be taking the position to say that money is batel. Money is not batel. But it's not going to say that. It's going to say the opposite. So that's the difficulty. So he says the kasha, just to point out, Taisha is going to say that it's going in the wrong direction over here. But he's saying the wrong position now. Rabbi is talking the wrong language. Also, the example that the Gemara brings is like a complicated case about bittul, and the way Rashi explains is just another example of bittul. From the tens of cases of bittul, maybe even 100 cases of bittul that in the Shas, the Gemara picked out one complicated case to say bittul, and we don't know why. Some of the Mepharshim ask the kasha, and they say towards him also. So we're not going to go into all that. It seems what the Gemara is going to do is show a case of bittul, and we'll see how complicated it is. But whatever the case is, there's a case of bittul, that something becomes nullified in the rove. And the question is going to be, does it make a difference if it has an owner or not? That's back to our question again. That we said that there is bittul and by Yisurim and by Tumah. Is the bittul by monetary value? That's the whole subject. And he's going to say, I'm going to bring you a case of some kind of a bittul by Tumah. And are you going to say there's a difference if there's an owner or not? That even though something should be bittul, but if there's an owner, you say it's not bittul. You. So the question is, who's you? Rav Safra is the one who's talking. He's the one who was of the opinion that it's not batel. So now he's talking. Are you going to say that if it has an owner that it's not batel? That he's talking to himself. He's the one who said it's not batel. So that's the difficulty in this Gemara, and I don't really have a pshat. I'm just going to read the Gemara and leave it as a question, and the Mepharshim talk about it. So what is this thing about bittul? So he says, Amalei. It's on the first one, okay, on the top line over here. Nevela betela b'shchuta, l'fi she'av shel hashchuta shetiyas nevela, but shchuta ina betela b'nevela, l'fi she'av shel nevela shetiyas hashchuta. This is the case. Rashi says he just wants to show you there's such a thing called bittul. And we have tens of cases, probably tens and tens of cases in the Shas about bittul. And this is the one case that he found to talk about, which is complicated. What does he talk about? He wants to know there are two kinds of meat. There's an avela and there's shchuta. There's an avela. Shchuta means shechted kosher meat, and avela means that it died, the animal died, and besides not being kosher, it's also tamei. The avela, an animal that died, it gives off tumah. So tumas maga, tumas masa. So what if you have pieces of nevela that come mixed in to pieces of shchuta? So as far as tumah, not as far as eating it, but as far as tumah, you touch one piece. Maybe you touch the nevela, you touch the shchuta. If you touch the kosher piece, is it called a suffix tumah? Is it possible you didn't touch the nevela? So here it says, is it called going in the back to the subject of min b'mino? It's a little bit complicated, and really the difficulty is going to be, what do we need all this complication for? It's not to get to the subject. You just want to get a case of bittul. But we'll listen to what it says. There's a mandam who said before, Abiyud holds min b'mino lo batel. I just want to say, Rabbi Lezer, before you came, you just spoke about your question on Friday, that whenever we say that something's batel, it surely has to be not discernible. So even when we talk about chitim and so on, we said that it was ground up. The art scroll brings down that it was ground up, so you can't discern. But it's min b'shein amino. So when we talk about min b'mino, ben b'shein amino, both cases are talking about that you can't discern them right now. But there's a thing called min b'mino, ben b'shein amino. The same type or different type. So here we're going that there's a mandama that says min b'mino, the same type is not batel, and ben b'shein amino is batel. That's Rabbi Yehuda before. We pass can maybe min b'mino is also batel maybe, but as far as machlokes rishonim, but min b'mino means the same type, and min b'shein amino means two different types. So min b'mino, if it's the same type, it's not going to become batel. Even if you have robe, it's not going to become batel. But min b'shein amino, then it is batel. We're going according to that mandiyama. So now the question is, meat that's kosher meat and the vela meat, is that called the same type? Is that called the same type or not? Like chitim and sorim is called different types. Chitim and chitim is called the same type.
I thought they're in the same category of teruah.
Because it's meat. No. Chitim and sorim is called different. No. Chitim and sorim is two different types. Even if both of them are called grain, but it's two types of grain. It's called min b'shein amino. Chitim and chitim, or sorim and sorim. That's called min b'mino. Yeah, the same thing. But chitim and sorim is called two different mina. See, the question is, you have meat. Both of them are meat. They look the same, but one is kosher meat and one is non-kosher meat. One is nevela meat. Is it called min b'mino, min b'shein amino? That's the question. See, here it says a very lumdisha thing that it depends if the mavatel, the mavatel is the majority. There's the mavatel and then the misbatel, the one that is nullifying and the nullified. The majority is the nullifier, that's the mavatel, the robe, and the minority is called the one that's becoming nullified, that's the misbatel. So if the mavatel could become the same as the misbatel, if the majority could become the same status as the minority, so then it's called min b'mino. But if the majority cannot become the minority, we'll say it doesn't make sense yet, the words that I'm saying. We'll explain it in a second. If the majority could change its essence to become the same as the minority, that's called min b'mino. If the majority cannot change its essence to become the same as the minority, it's called min b'shein amino. What does all that mean? So how could shchuta become nevela? Could a piece of kosher meat, could it become treifah meat? It's already shechted. Could you take a piece of kosher shechted meat and make it into a nevela meat? No, the animal was shechted as kosher meat. Could nevela meat become kosher meat? So I would think also not. But Rashi says it could, because if it becomes a nifshal me'achilas adam, if it becomes inedible because it becomes disgusting, so then it becomes mutter again. The tumah goes off, the issa goes off. It's become, Rashi says it's nisrach. If it becomes pagum, so then the tumah goes off. The issa also probably goes off. It's not royal ma'achal adam. So it could be not that it could become kosher meat. That's what it's not. Rashi says the sugi here is about tumah. But is it called min b'mino? So here it says, now we have the back in nevela, betela b'shchuta. If there's pieces of nevela meat that came, a minority of nevela meat that fell into shchuta meat, kosher shchuta meat. A minority that came into a majority of shchuta, that's batel. Why is it batel? Because it's called min b'she'eino mino. Why is it min b'she'eino mino? Because the shchuta cannot be, because the shchuta, which is the majority, cannot become the nevela. So it's called two different meaning. Because the majority, which is the shchuta, the kosher meat, cannot become treifah meat. So that's called min b'she'eino mino. Min b'she'eino mino is batel. But the opposite case, shchuta ain't a betela ben nevela. If you had one piece of a minority of kosher meat that fell into a majority of nevela meat, so that's called min b'mino. It's called the same type. Why is it called the same type? Because the majority could become the same essence as the kosher meat, because if it will become nisrach, if it become disgusting, so then it will become kosher to eat it also. Kosher, or it wouldn't have tumah, or maybe it's even not usher to eat if it becomes disgusting, not ma'il ma'chaladam. So this is a very complicated case. Min v'mino, b'msheino mino, it changes its essence because it's very complicated. And Rashi says all it wants to tell us is a case of bittul. That the Resha is a case that you do say min b'sheino mino is bittul. Very, very fancy footwork to say a case of bittul. So that's a kasha that the Mefarshim ask, why is this the only case that we found? But
Rashi, the
yeah.
language. Tuv eno karuya nevela.
Yes.
Not called the veil.
Okay, is that as far as Tumah, as far as Isser? Fine. It's not called Neveil. So this is a fancy case. All it wants to tell us is a case of Min B'Shein Aminu, which is Batel. Why in the world do you need such a fancy case? We'll leave it as a mystery. But what does the Gemara want to say with all this? Achinami, dechi islay bailam lo batla. I'm going to say that something which is Batel. Min B'Shein Aminu, the ratio, the first case. I'm going to say that if the pieces of meat happen to have an owner, so it's not Batel because the ownership is not Batel, means Tumah is Batel, Isser is Batel. I'm going to say that that's only provided that it doesn't have an owner. But if it has an owner, so then the ownership is not batel, which is the subject of our whole sugya, is ownership batel or not. So the problem with this whole Gemara is if Safra changed, he got to the wrong side, he got to the wrong team. He's on the team that's saying that it's not batel. And now he's saying you think it's not batel. That's the wrong niggin. he's supposed to hold that it's not batel. So that's difficulty in the Gemara. So I'm just going to continue and say Tos has the kasha, but he's okay. If you're going to say there's a difference, if it has an owner or not, but Tanya, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, Chafsi Hefka Konan Shvisa, Afi Shein Lam Bailam, Domin Kmi Sheish Lo Behem Bailam. There's a machlokes. We had this in Erevin. We touched upon this in Erevin. If we know that an object also has hefker. That's how our Masechet over here. That animals and kalim also are limited to the tchum of the owner. What if it's hefker? Does it get its own tchum? Really, there's no such Gemara. Rashi points out that the one Erevin is not talking about this case of Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. It's talking about a person who fell asleep. A person who's sleeping, Ben Hashmash is considered he doesn't have das. He's equal. It's not the same thing. It's not hefker, but it's equal to the same thing as a kli. A person who doesn't have das, if he's awake, so then he's called a bar das, and he gets shvisa. He gets wherever Ben Hashmash, wherever he is, he's kona the 2,000 amas around him. He's kona his dalad amas, and he has rights to go 2,000 amas in each direction. But if he's happened to be sleeping, Ben Hashmash, does he also acquire the shvisa and he gets 2,000 amas, or he's like a hefker? That's like a kli, which would be hefker.
He made the kinyan before Shabbos.
There's no kinyan, no kinyans. He didn't make an area. He didn't put on an area. That's a person sleeping. A person's camping out. He's sleeping, and he was going to say shalom aleichem l'chun iranana, whatever. He was tired from the whole Friday, and he fell asleep. He came up Ben Hashmoshes. He wakes up. He sees already 3 stars around. When Friday night came in, Ben Hashmoshes, he was sleeping. So is he going to shvisa or not? That's the question over there. And the Gemara compares it to Chefsei Hefker. Yeah, just like what's the din about a kli that doesn't have any owner? Is that when the Shabbos comes or Yontif, does it get a kinyan shvisa? That means that wherever it is, you can't take it out of his 2,000 amas. And even though you come, you have a right to go someplace, but the kli was konan shvisa or not. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says Chefsei Hefker konan shvisa. Even something which is hefker, now you pick it up, it belongs to you, but it doesn't help because this thing Ben Hashmoshes didn't belong to you, and it was konan shvisa. It's limited to his 2,000 amas. You can't take it to your 2,000 amas. That's what Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says. And what does he say? What does the Gemara want to derive from that? That even though it has no owners, it's as if it does have owners. So the Gemara is trying to say that ownership is not dependent. Rashi says that Abaye wanted to say before. So I don't get the question answer over here. We said the question seems to be in the wrong direction. But what Rashi explains here is that Rav Safra is asking back to Abaye. Abaye said before there's a difference if it has Tovin, it doesn't have Tovin. That Abaye was the one who said that ownership is batel. The ownership is batel. But if there's a Toveya, if the owner is demanding it, then it's not batel. There's a difference if the owner is aggressive or not. If he's a Tovin, if he wants his money back, so then the case of the throws that are mixed into the grain, over there the money's not batel. But if the owner of the money of the minority is not demanding anything, then it is batel. So this part of the kasha at least is saying that from Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, you see not like that. You see that Chefsei Hefker konan shvisa, that means that we don't care if it has an owner or not. If there's value to it, if value is batel, it's batel. If it's not batel, it's not batel. We don't care if there's somebody that's demanding the money or not. So Rav Safra is trying to say there's the chiluk of Abaye that said there's a difference if the owner is demanding back the money or not, shouldn't be a difference, and therefore Rav Safra is of the opinion that money is not batel. And he wants to answer the kasha. It means back to the beginning, the whole Gemara, just to get a zoom out a second to get back to what the Gemara is talking about. Someone made a bread and he had the flour, but he needed the water. She borrowed water from her next door neighbor, and now she has a bread. She baked the bread, fine. But now she wants to go with her 2,000 amos Mashiach Eruv someplace. So no, you're limited to the tchum. The water can't go out of its tchum because when Yontif came in, it belonged to the neighbor. And the question was, why do you say that is batel? That was the question that the Chachamim asked. And they said that it's batel. It's only minority should be batel. And Rabbi Abba and who else is on that side? Rav Safra. They said that money is not batel. Money is not batel. And that's what we're holding now. Back to the kasha was after all the kashas, they're asking again, money is not batel.
It only stays in its own form if it's not batel.
Right. That's
Maybe
then,
it's
then the
not
mission
the
will be good.
answer.
They come to answer the mission. Rabbi Abba and Rav Safra are coming to answer the mission. The mission makes sense that money is not batel, ownership is not batel, and the last thing is trying to prove, even if nobody's toveya, even if the neighbor is not demanding back their water and spices till tomorrow, so it's mamash ein lo tovin, still the money is not batel, and therefore the mission makes sense. And Abaya right now, the Amalei, the Abaya is going to knock it down again against this opinion, and on the side of the laughers, the ones who laughed and said no, that money is batel. Yes, I'm done.
Did he cook it? Did he bake it in the owner, the water owner's house?
It doesn't make a difference. It doesn't make a difference. When the Ben Hashmashas happens, everything of your ownership is kona your tchum. So the person who has flour, so his flour is limited to his tchum. The person who has the water next door is limited to their tchum. So now I'm at
I
a
need water.
I took water, I borrowed water, but you can very nice. You can use the water and you can eat it, but you can't take it out of its tchum. And even if you made it into a dough, you've mixed your flour and their water, and now you made a dough. This bread is limited to both tchum, and you can't take it out of the owner, out of the limits of the water owner and the flour owner. And the question was, say the water should be butter. That was the kasha. The water and the spices and the salt should be butter. And the suggestion said by Rabbi Abba and Rav Safra was that ownership is not butter. Monetary value is not butter. Isurim are butter. And Tumas
Therefore,
butter.
you can't take it out.
Right, then it will make sense. But the ones who are laughing are against that. So they say no, that ownership is also batel. That was this whole discussion. And last more tried to differentiate if the owner of the minority is demanding it back or not. And at the last thing, Rav Safra thought that he had a good proof that money is not batel, even if no one's demanding it. That's what we're holding. 4 lines in the bottom. Amalei Abai said back.
I'm sorry, just a person who falls asleep, Benish Mashas, what's the status?
We hold that they are kodesh visa. I'm sorry, I forgot. The Allah. Here Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says that hefse hefke kodesh visa. I forgot the Allah. I have to look it over there. There's Machokas Tanoim, and I forgot the Allah over there. Okay, the Gemara continues over here. Amalei mikam edames yisura la mamona yisura batal mamona la batal. This is the Abaya, which is agreeing to the kasha of the laughers and says that Isra doesn't have to do with money. So the way Rashi explains that the kasha took a little twist now. Till now, the Gemara was asking that monetary value is not batal. At this point, it seems Rashi explains that even if the money is batal, the ownership, even if the money, is not batal, the money is not batal, but the Isra still should be batal. Means still now we put it together, package deal, that if you own it, so then it has your tchum. Let's say the owner of the water, the spices, it's a minority, but if it's not batel, so then it has your tchum.
If it's not batel.
If it's not batel, right? Thank you. If it's not batel, so then it has the tchum of the owner of the water. That's how they want to explain the Mishnah. And now until now we tried to judge. Maybe it is batel. Maybe you lose your ownership. That was the whole discussion until now. And now at the last minute, Abai seems to say that even if you're right, that your monetary value is not batel, but the Issa Tchumen still should go up. Means, till now we said that the Issa Tchumen is riding on the ownership. Whoever's the owner, if your ownership, if you have monetary value, the water belongs to you, the spices belong to you, the salt belongs to you, and you didn't lose your ownership because it became batel. So then the Issa Tchumen is riding on your ownership. If you own it, so then the Issa Tchumen should be limited to your tchum. And now at this point, as Rashi explains over here, comparing Issa to Mammon, even if you're right that the Mammon is not batel, even if you're right, taking your aside now, that the person who lost his 1 kilo and somebody else's 10 kilo, he could demand back the money. At which the Gemara beginning, they seem to laugh and say, no, that you lost it. What can I do for you? It fell into the ocean. It disappeared. It fell into my thing. And min b'mino, min b'shen b'mino is bottle. Whenever you hold that, it's bottle, so you lost your ownership. And I can't do nothing to do for you. I feel bad for you, but don't come to me to reimburse you. Here the Gemara seems to take a little different twist, that even if you're right that the money is not batel, and you do have a right to demand your money, but the Issa should be batel. That the Issa Tchumen is not riding on the Issa, on the money. Even if the money is not batel, the Issa should be batel. So to make a long story short, we're back to the kasha. We didn't get an answer yet. We tried, or Baba tried an answer. The Gemara judged it, tried to handle it. Back to the kasha again. That the Mishnah says that the owner of the salt and the spices and the water if the Mishnah says that it has the tchum, you have to be limited to that tchum also. The one who made the bread is limited to the tchum of the water that he borrowed. And the kasha is let it be batal. At least the issa should be batal. Even if the mamanis is not batal, that was the whole discussion. But issa should be batal.
Take it out.
Not take it out, but take it out of the tchum. Yeah,
Yeah.
go to your tchum, even though it has water in it. The water is batal, the spices are batal, the salt is batal, and take it to your tchum and ignore the issa of the tchum of that. That was the so after all this, we're back to the same kasha again. So the Gemara takes over. The time of my what's not going to answer the kasha. I mean, Baba tried, but it didn't work. Now we're going to have three answers to the kasha. It's three short and easy answers. Abaye Omar Gzeru Shem Batasa Isa B'Shutfis. Abaye says it's Gzeru. You're right. That really, if you have the flour and you just took the water from the other one, or you have the flour and you took the spices, or you have the flour and you took the salt, you're right. In all these cases, the flour is the main thing. The rest of them is the meat, should be butter. But if you're going to say that in this case you're allowed to take the bread to wherever you want to your tchum, so then people are going to think that if I made a bread b'shutfis, a bread b'shutfis means the whole bread was made b'shutfis. Both people bought flour. Both people bought flour. I'm also going to think that I'm allowed to take the bread into mine. They're not going to differentiate between if the bread was made with my flour and your water, or part of my flour and part of your flour. If they're equal, both of them are going to be mamish b'shutfis. And over there, there's no bitter because both of them gave equal amounts of flour. So if you're going to say this case, you're allowed to take it out of the tchum. So you'll think in the other case of Isa b'shutfis also. So they made it gzera. So enechanami, now the Gemara is answering that really the halacha of tchumen should be batal, the miyah should be batal, but it's exera that in another case where it's not batal, you're also going to think that it's not limited to the tchum. Simple answer. Rav Amar, even a simpler answer maybe, the time of vida, the time of batal, spices, and you can throw for that water, for that matter also salt, that it's made for taste. And taste is not batal. It means whenever we know that things are batal, like berov and shishim, but there's a halacha that tam is not batal. That taste, something that's made for taste, does not lose its identity. And over here, when you put spices in, it's made for taste. That's why you put it in. You can't say that it doesn't. It's not insignificant. You wouldn't have put it in if it would be insignificant. It's because you want it. Taste is not batal. Taisha says that in the spices is also the salt and the water, even though the water is not made for tam. But Taisha says that the whole main part of the bread is going to be the water. Here's the last word, and last line of Tosfos. Mayim chashivi the ikar isa nasis mayim. Since the whole dough is made out of flour and water, so the water is also considered an ikar. That's the second teretz, also easy teretz, that spices are not batal, and that we hold up in the Hilchos Bittul. That spices, since it's the time of Avidah, it's made to give taste, so it's not batal. And here's Tosfos saying Chiddush also that water, flour and water that makes bread, the water is considered a very significant component, and even though it's going to be a minority, it's not batal. And the last teretz is also easy. Let's get the last teretz over here. Ravashi Yama, top of the next, top of Lamates. Ravashi Yama, Mishum Davi Dava Shesh Lomativim. Dava Shesh Lomativim, I feel better for butter. Though always low kasha, that should be butter. Here, right, what's the issue over here? Tchumen. Is there going to be a tchumen? The one who donated the water, the spices, the salt. It's only a meal, so it should be batal. So we had this call at the beginning of the Masechta. That's only you only say batal on something which is, if you say that it's not batal, so then it's usher. But here it's a davar sheish lamatir. And why is that? Rashi says 2 points. One is that tomorrow after Yontif there's no tchum anymore. After Shabbos after Yontif, so then you can do whatever you want. You can take whatever you want. And also Rashi says it's a davar sheish lamatir because you can eat it right here. No one, it's not. You can eat it here. The whole issue is to take it out of someplace. It's not usher to eat. It's only to take it out of the tchum. That's not called. It's not usher. It's limited. So limiting is not called that it's usher. When you have treif meat falls into kosher meat, so then you say bittul, because if it's treif meat is not bittul, so you can't eat the whole thing. But over here, it's not usher. It's just that you can't take it out of the tchum. So don't take it out of the tchum. And Rashi says even more. Tomorrow you can take it out of the tchum if you want to. Also only on Shabbos and if you can. So you have 3 answers to the kasha. That's the end of the sugya. The kasha, 1 kasha and 1 big sugya that we don't have such clarity on. I don't. But we'll say what that tentative answer might have been. And then there's 3 answers that come out. The question was that even if you made a bread out of your flour and somebody else's water, spices, and salt, you should not be limited to the Mishnah says you're limited to the tchum of both. Everybody, but the Mishnah was, why should it be limited? It's only a meat. All those things, the water, the salt, and the spices is all a minority, and it should be batal. So first the Gemara tried for a long time to talk about that monetary value is not batal. At the end, the Gemara came out that even if you're right, that monetary but maybe it is, but maybe monetary value is batal. But even if it's not, but still the issa that's riding on it should become batal. So even if the monetary, they could demand back their thing, but
That's a terror.
the issa, that's the kasha. That's the kasha now.
Oh.
That it should become batal. The issa should become batal, and you should be able to. The Gemara tried to say that the monetary value is not batal. That would have been an answer. But the Gemara is not happy with that because even if the monetary value is not batal, but the issa which is riding on it should become batal. So the tchumen should be, the issa tchumen should be batal. That was the kasha. You have three terutzim. Abaye says gzeira that you might think that always the bread made b'shutfis you're allowed to take out of into one person's tchum, and really you're not allowed to. Only if there'd be a bittul case, like one has the flour, one has the water. Both of them donated flour equally, so then there's no bittul. So in order not to make a mistake, they said even though there's bittul over here, disregard it. And
Bittul violence. Bittul violence. They bittul the violence on the water, they bittul violence on the
we're talking
flour.
about the tchumen of the owner of the water and the spices. So even though halachically it might be bottle, that is a tchumen might be bottle, but we don't look at it. Don't look like it's bottle. Second teretz is that things made for taste is not bottle. So the salt and the spices is made for taste, so it's not bottle. And also the water, as we said, the water is the main component of a dough. Also, it's not bottle. And the third teretz is that the whole issue about tchumen is only limiting you today and only restricting you in a certain place doesn't make it usher. So therefore, we're not going to use the concept of bittul because you could eat it as is or eat it tomorrow or someplace else. So the sheish lamatirin is not bittul. Okay.
So therefore, it's really is us.
So therefore the Mishnah is right. The Mishnah is right
But you
that you cannot take it out of the tchum of both the owner of the flour and the owner
Also,
of
the
the water.
laughers were. The laughers were wrong.
The what?
It's the laughers were.
The laughers, no, they knew the Mishnah is right, but they had a kasha, and someone suggested a terrace, and they said the terrace is laughable. But we have other terutzim. But that terrace they left at, and the Gemara doesn't bring it back on the stage. And maybe yes, maybe not. But that no.
I'm sorry, I knew it's not the Mishnah, but could you stop the three truths again? How
That either it's a gzeira of a bread which has no roven miyut. In the case where there's a roven and miyut, like the flour and the water, you're right. The water should be butter, the spices should be butter. But sometimes they'll have a shufis in the bread. Both of them are equal partners.
that should fit?
That's it. Both of them made it. What does mean shufis? Both of them made it equally. That doesn't make a difference. We don't care about that. We just talk about that as far as food goes. Both of them, the ingredients are not butter. Second teretz is that things made for taste is not butter. The time of either low butter. So the spices, it's significant. The spices and the salt, they give taste, so they're not butter. And that's a lot in your day also. I think that spices. The spices, not sharp. Spices.
I have an answer. You can't make the bread without the water, even though it's a meal. But there is not going to be bread without that water.
So that's similar to what Taisvus, that's what we pointed out. Taisvus, the bottom line, Taisvus, you talk about spices and salt and water. So spices and salt, that's the Gemara says the time of it. And water, but Taisvus says the main dough is made out of the water.
Right.
So therefore, it has chashivus and it's not butter. And Rabashi was Davashesh Lamatirin, Afilu Balaflo butter. Next thing, the Mishnah says of Yuda Potev Amayim. So this was a sheet that says that water is special. Water is different because water gets evaporated, whatever, it gets mixed in with the dough, and therefore the water doesn't exist. The water is not nicker anymore. So he says, even though the water, the spices and the salt, yes, but the water is different. That wasn't the whole Gemara until I was talking about Rov and Miyat, even the spices and the salt. But Abuda argues about the water, and he says water is not nicker because you don't see the water anymore. The Gemara is the kasha that Abuda only argues on the water, not on the salt. But there's a brisa which says that he argues on the salt also. Mayim malach lo. Abuda is only arguing on the water, but not on the salt. And the salt he agrees that it is nicker and it is also. But Tanya Abuda mayim umelach. Here's the word melach. Mayim umelach b'teilin. That salt is also butter. Both if they're talking about a dough that you put salt into the dough, or if you have a pot of food and you put salt into the pot, and it is butter. And our Mishnah only argues on the water. The water in the dough gets lost, but the water in the salt in the dough. He doesn't argue in our Mishnah, but in the Bryce he argues on the salt also. So the more to say, what's that?
Not so significant in time.
Not a question about bittul. Here the question is if it loses, if it's not there, it dissolves. It's not you don't see it. The thing about bittul is a sugi before, but in the Mishnah Peter says water is special because it's gone. What's Mishnah? If you turn the page back to the bottom of Lamed Zayin, over there it says Ein Bo Mamish, the bottom line. Bottom line of Lamed Zayin. Ein Bo Mamish, Rashi's Lamed Zayin. Amud Aleph from the bottom line. Ein Bo Mamish, and Rashi says Ein Nikoros. But he only argues on the water. The water is not nicker, but the salt and the spices he doesn't argue on. But the Bryce says he argues on salt also. He argues on the salt also. So the Gemara says that low kasha, it depends what kind of salt. Some salt dissolves, you don't see it at all. Some salt is like coarse salt and you still see it. Low kasha, melech, no stuff, melech is truthness. The two kinds of salt, One's called Sodom salt, and one is called Struknis. So which is which? Rashi says Mel Sodomus is very fine salt. Some argue and say the opposite shot. One is fine, one is coarse. The fine one is the one that's batel. That's where Buddha's masking that it also says it's batel. He argues and he says that the salt is also batel. That's the brisa. The Mishnah is talking about a coarse salt that is nicker, that even though you made the bread or the pot, you still see the salt. So it depends. He's just saying the Metzias. Whatever the Metzias is, Buddha says if you don't see it, then it's batel. If you do see it, it's not batel. But Tanya Yehuda, there's not a kasha now because still now in the brisa before he argued about the bein bisa bein b'kdera, that salt and water are batel both in the dough and in a pot if you're making food. And here the brisa, Tanya Yehuda Omer maimu malach b'telim bisa bein b'telim b'kdera. B'nei rotva. He says that I'm arguing only about salt and water in a dough. There, I say that it's gone. You don't see it anymore. It disappears. But in the pot, the water is not gone. You see the water and also salt. So there's the contradiction in the brisa. I'm arguing also by kedera. That's a contradiction in the two brises. That this brisa says ein b'telim b'kedera. That over there I'm asking that the water and salt are noticeable. In the brisa before, a couple of lines ago, he said that bein bisa bein b'kedera. Ma'im u'melech b'telim bein bisa bein b'kedera. So it's a contradiction between these two brises. Here it says they wrote for that the rota of the gravy means that the thing is still there. When you have a gravy, you have a pot, so there's in a kedera. Also, it's not batel. And a second ago, he said that it is batel. So the more answers again, it depends on the metzias. Depends what kind of gravy. If there's a gravy because it's a liquid gravy, so then I'm asking that's when Abuda said that it's not batel. But if it will be if it will be thick, there's no gravy. Then you don't see the water and you don't see the salt. So then it is batel. So again, the Mishnah spoke about just to get back our bearings. The whole subject was talking about chum, that besides a person being limited to chum, also his animals and his utensils and his foods. And if you have a mixture of two people that borrowed or shutfis, whatever they did, so it's limited to the shutfis of everybody. Everybody's ingredients are limited to that chum, and you can't take it out of the chum that anybody is going to hold back from. It has to be overlapping everybody's chum, because everybody's ingredients count. And Rav Yehuda, first the Gemara spoke about bittul. The Gemara said there's no bittul. Rav Yehuda in the Mishnah spoke about that it disappeared. It's not here. It's different than bittul, not a lachik bittul, but it disappeared. You don't see the water. You don't see the salt. So that's the machlokes between Rav Yehuda and the Rabbanan, and even Rav Yehuda himself. He says it depends what kind of salt. Sometimes water in the dough disappears. Does salt disappear? It depends what kind of salt. Coarse salt, fine salt. And also, as far as in a pot, if there's a kedei, if there's a rot, if there's a gravy, so then the water is noticeable. It didn't disappear. But if there's no gravy, everything became hardened, and you don't see any gravy anymore. So then he says that the water and the salt is batel even in a dish, not only in a. Okay, that goes about bittul. Next Mishnah, we talk about also about chumin, and now the issue is about a coal, C-O-A-L, gachelas, a coal. Is that considered that it's my coal? I want to give somebody a coal. Very nice. You can use my coal, but it's limited to my tchum. Don't take it. You want to make a mangal someplace. You want to make it, but don't take it out of the tchum. Even though you made a half tchum down the road to go to visit your your friend, but don't take the coal. I'm lending you the coal, but when Yantiv came in, it's my coal. So the Gemara is going to say that's what the Mishnah is going to say, that a coal is considered the davar mamashi, is considered that it has substance to it, and therefore it's limited to the tchum of the owner, but a flame is not. A flame is not considered mamashas. Therefore, you go to your neighbor and get a flame, and then you can take the flame out of the tchum, even though it was my flame. But a flame is not considered mamashas, and therefore you can take it out of the tchum. That's what the Mishnah is going to say, and it's going to give other examples. We're going to have altogether 5 examples of this difference between a gachelas and a shalheves, between a coal and a flame. So here it says the first.
So you could light your cigarette and walk out of your tchum. Walk into your tchum and out of somebody else's.
Right. You got the flame from somebody else, even though it was his flame, but I took the flame. The flame does have any mamashas, right? If I want to take the whole coal, I can't take the coal. Yeah, you're not right. You can't smoke. Yeah, you can't smoke. But so after smoking, you want to take a flame in order to make your cookout someplace to your oven. So you need a fire, and you need a fire. So I take a fire from somebody, and I take a big wok. I put it into some kind of lantern that it should be able to not to blow out. So the flame is not a problem. That the flame has to stay in the tchum. The flame doesn't have to stay in the tchum. Flame is not considered davar sheish lo mamash. That's the main yisod. A coal is limited to the feet of the place where the owner could walk, limited to his tchum. But a flame it's not limited to That's all we need for our sugya. But once we get this, we go into other cases, other applications of the same principle. A coal of hektish is considered as a mamoshes, and you're not allowed to, if someone benefited from a coal of hektish, so it's really has to be a korbanosha, a sham ilos. A flame of hektish, so lachatchila don't benefit from it. It's asamir rabbanan. We'll see soon the gemara asamir rabbanan, but there's no milah. If someone did, so he's not chayiv korban because it's not a raisa. And the third application, amozik achelas l'shus harabim on Shabbos. He took out a coal. He took a coal from inside Rishus Yachad to Rishus Harabim, so he's chayiv for carrying because it's considered mamoshes. But Shalevis, but if he transferred a flame from Rishus Yachad to Rishus Harabim, he's not chayiv because it's not considered that davar mamoshi. And we have three cases. Our case was Tchum, but they gave another two cases about Hektish and about carrying on Shabbos. The Bryce has 5 cases. Tanur Rabbanan, 3 of them we had already, we're going to get 2 more. Tanur Rabbanan, Chamisha Dvarim Nemu B'Gecheles. There are 5 things said about a coal in contrast to a flame. Hagecheles Kragli Abayla, Shalevis B'Chol Mokum. We just had that. That as far as Chumen, the coal is limited to the place of the owner, but the flame is not. Second, we also had already Gecheles Shalektish Molin Ba, Shalevis Lonen Molin. Like we just said that a Hektish owns a coal, you're not allowed, if someone benefited from it, he's Chayiv Milah, Hasham Milos, but Shalevis, the flame, but with the rice there's no problem, but they just made this a Rabbanah, you shouldn't be benefit from it, but with the rice it's okay. And this is a new case now, we didn't have this yet. Gecheles Shel Avodah Zarah.
This is the third one.
This is the third one, which the Mishnah didn't speak about. The Mishnah has 1, 2, and 4. And 3 and 5 are going to be additions in the Brisa. So Gecheles Shel Avodah Zarah, a coal of Avodah Zarah. As it asabana, yes, asura, it's asabana. It has considered by Moshe, it's considered just like avodah zarah asabana to the coal of avodah zarah asabana. Misham she avodah zarah. V'shalebes muteres, but the flame of avodah zarah is muter. You're allowed to take a flame from an avodah zarah and use it. And here it doesn't say asabana. Here the Gemara we talk about doesn't even say asamir rabbanan. It says even with the Raisa, even with the rabbanan, you're allowed to take the flame of avodah zarah and you're allowed to benefit from it. And the fourth one, which we had in the Mishnah already, that we have learned about, that carrying on Shabbos, the carrying gecheles is the Raisa, but from Rishus Yachad to Rishus Harabim, but a flame is potter. If you transferred it from Rishus Yachad to Rishus Harabim, it wouldn't be chayiv. And the fifth case, that first one line, somebody made a vow that he's not going to benefit from his friend, so is he allowed to benefit from his coal? Again, that the gecheles is considered mamoshes, so you're not allowed to, but the shaleves is not considered mamoshes, you're allowed to. So that's the Brisa. We had 3 are the same as the Mishnah, and 2 additions about avodah zarah and about neder. The Gemara is wondering that by hektish, we also said that the shaleves is really nothing, but mirabbanan you're not allowed to benefit. But by avodah zarah, we didn't say it's Sasha Rabbanan, we said it's even mutter. It didn't make this Rabbanan. The Gemara is going to wonder how come by Hektish they made Issa Rabbanan to benefit from the flame, and by avodah zarah they didn't make any Rabbanan. That's the Gemara's kasha in the second wide line. Ma'ishna shalevas that avodah zarah the sharia, and ma'ishna dektish tasira. How come the flame of avodah zarah they said it's mutter even Rabbanan? They made no siyag, they made no fence around it.
Right, because it's definitely a chelik in avodah zarah.
So it's not. So it's not. The flame is not considered mamoshes.
Right.
So the same way all these halachas, the flame is not considered. Why the spiritual?
It symbolizes spiritual.
It doesn't exist. It's not a thing. It's not a substance. It's not considered a substance. It's not considered davish engo mamish. But the gecheles is. But the shalabas is not.
I understand it's a physical matter, and this is a fight. But there's an ikon avodah in all kinds of avodah.
You're not using it for avodah zarah. You want to use it for to light the light, to make light in the base
pulled it out of Comer's.
Yeah, but the flame is not his. It's not. It's okay, but it's not a sub. It has no substance. Okay.
Yeah, but that I understand. I'm trying to.
How about ear? Ear. Ear. A-I-R. Of ear. Ear. You take a bag of ear. You not fill up a tank from
It's all in Israel. That's all
okay.
They put it in a can and it's sell it in America.
Okay, that's the most conscious. What's the difference between avodah zarah that they didn't ask me rabbanon even, and by hektish made it rabbanon. By hektish also, it's really nothing. You take the flame of hektish and use it for your benefit. But rabbanon don't. They made a siyag. They said rabbanon don't. How come by hektish they made a siyag with rabbanon and by avodah zarah they didn't? The answer is Avodah Zarah the Meisa or Badil Yinshemina Lagaza Rabbanan. That Avodah Zarah doesn't need any kind of fence because it's disgusting to people. People naturally are disgusting from it, like Chaim David is saying.
Right.
So they're not going to get any closer. Even if you use the flame, they're not going to use the coal. You don't have to make any fences because people are far away from it anyway. So you can tell them this is mutter and they're not going to go further. But a hektish, even though hektish also is very chomer to people, but it's not disgusting. On the contrary, people like it. Hektish lomas lavodili and shemine gazer berabana. They point out that you do find hektish is considered, people are scared of hektish, but not as much. But it's not disgusting. So something which is not disgusting, people might have more room closer. That avodah zarah is disgusting, so they're not close to it at all. So you don't not necessary to make an isra rabbanan, but by hektish they're not as distanced from using hektish as they are from doing avodah zarah. So therefore, we have to answer the flame of rabbanan in order to shouldn't come to use the coal. The next thing in the Mishnah Gemara goes back to the thing about Shabbos. It's said in the Mishnah and the Brisa. Amotzi kechelish just rab mechayev shaleves potter. So the Gemara is a kasha from a Brisa. Vatanya amotzi shaleves kol shu chayev. There is a Brisa that says that if you take out a flame, you are chayev on Shabbos. Our Mishnah says you're not. Yeah. Vatanya amotzi shaleves kol shu chayev. That even a small flame, you take out a flame on Shabbos, you are chayev. It is considered a substance. And our Mishnah and the Brisa say that it's not. Contradiction about Shabbos. Rav Sheish is going to seal b'kesim. That's only if the flame is attached to a toothpick, to a stick, because then that's chashivos. The flame alone doesn't have chashivos. But if it's attached to not that you chai for the toothpick, for the stick, but the flame which is attached to a stick, the flame has chashivos, and you chai for taking out the flame. The Mars the kasha, and the Mishnah, the Mars is going to say soon, but the Mishnah says you put it for the flame is when it's not attached to anything, and the Mars is going to try to figure how could you take a flame without anything. But the Gemara continues, if you have a stick, so then forget about the flame. You're chayiv for taking out the stick. If you have a stick that you're taking out, so forget about the flame. The stick alone should be chayiv for. The Gemara says, but less leishura. That is less than the shear. If the stick was very small and it didn't have the shear to be chayiv for, like the Mishnah says that the amount of wood you chayiv for carrying on Shabbos is only if it's enough wood to be able to cook a egg, which is easy to cook, which is a chicken egg. That's basic tanagolas. So if you don't have enough wood to be able to cook egg, so that's not considered a chashuv amount, and you would be potter. But now, since it has a flame on it, so the flame is a chashuv flame, and you be high for carrying out the flame. That's one terrace. The second terrace is a similar terrace that again also that the flame is hanging on something. That if he rubbed a kli with oil and he hung the flame on it, means if you take even if you don't have a stick, something that the flame holds on to, but if you take a kli and you smear it with oil, also the flame will dance on it because there's oil over there. So that's another case that if that's called a chashivas, the fact that flame is hanging on something, then you also have. It's very similar to the case before of the stick, and they talk about it. One is a chiddush more, one is a chiddush more than the other, but they both the same idea that the flame which is not independent is hanging on something. That's a chashuv flame, and that is going to be chayiv for Shabbos.
And how about the object that the
and the Master Kash again, the typical mishum mona, if you're taking it out on a kli, so then you chayiv for the kli. The answer is b'chaspa. It's only a piece. It's only a shard, the piece of earthenware, so it's not chashuv. But the Gemara says no. There's also a chayiv taking out a shard also. The typical mishum chaspa, even a piece of cheres also is chashuv, and you chayiv for carrying it out. Forget about the flame. But the less leishua. Oh, they're all saying same terrace that is less than the shear because everything has a shear. In the case of the kli cheres, chaspa means cheres. The cheres that you took out was less than the shear. What's the case? The amount of cheres that's considered a chashuv amount, significant amount that b'chai for Shabbos is only if it's worth to put between pasam lachaber. Rashi describes if you have boards and sometimes you have to put a chip of something. Today they do this also when they build. You see sometimes they put in chips of wood in order to hold the bricks in place. That's called the same idea that until the cement dries, the same idea. So here you have two boards and you have to adjust something that it shouldn't get warped or something. So you put a chip in. You put the thing that we're talking about is a flame. That you carry out a flame. If you carried it out on a stick or out or on a piece of cheres which was smeared with oil, so also that's considered a chashuv flame. But the Mars Akasha, then you should be high for the piece of cheres alone. Forget about the flame. So the Mars says that the cheres was less than the shear. What's the shear? The shear is enough that you'd use as a chip in order to be able to put between two boards that have to be placed in a certain position that they shouldn't get warped. So whatever, Rashi gives a few examples why you'd want to put a chip of cheres. Nowadays they use a chip of wood. The same idea. Let's give an example of what they use. So then if you have to have that shear, if it has less than that shear, it's not chayiv. But the fact that you put a flame on it, then you are chayiv for the flame. So the more saying all the cases he says chayiv for carrying a flame is only if it's hanging on something. Now the Gemara says, okay, so what's the case that you're not chayiv? Our Mishnah says that you're not chayiv for a flame. What's the case? Not hanging anything. What's the case where you are carrying a flame and you're potter because not hanging anything? Right. You go into you threw it to a Shusha Rabbim. How do you throw a flame? Anybody can help me? How do you throw a flame? It seems like there's such a case that you could take the flame and throw it somehow. I mean, and it's gonna travel. Probably it's not gonna take too long till it gets extinguished because it's not hanging, no fuel on it. But is there such a thing that you could blow a flame? You could take a flame, get a flame. It has no stick. It's not hanging on anything. And the flame itself.
The guys usually take a little bit of petroleum and they blow and the flame goes out.
Flying. Okay, that's good. If that's a good case.
It's sitting on the delic.
Yeah, but the delic is just flying out. Like it's
That's
not.
true.
He said the delic alone. He's saying you high for the delic alone. I don't know.
It's a little bit like a cheres or a stick.
But it's not considered mamashas. Maybe I don't know. The Gemara seems to say that there's such a case. I didn't look at Artscroll. Maybe Artscroll is going to explain. If you some kind of liquid, a flammable liquid.
Guys blow fire, right? So they have in their mouth.
They have something.
Yeah, I've seen as well. Like Ham David says, exactly like that. With a, I think it's paraffin or something they put in their mouth, and it ignites, and they use it as well you can throw flames as well like that. I've seen people do it. It's actually throwing, but it's really the liquid that's ignited.
So the question,
but the reason
why
you could,
the liquid alone, that same way the Gemara goes, to be high for the liquid alone. Maybe the fact that it's burning, so it has no mamashah. So what are you saying? Less than a share.
And also
the flame has a share. Okay, so good, very good. So we got the shot that the flame, the same as the Gemara says that the liquid, the whatever that the Relez is saying that they have less than the share, whatever the share is going to be. But the flame is a chashav of the flame. Be high for the flame, not high for the flame. The flame has no mamashahs. Adkan, okay.
So
you have one. So you're not high for throwing a flame without not connected to anything. That's the end of the Gemara. So we have one daf left. Hashem will finish tomorrow. We have here from the next Mishnah until then the Masechta Hashem will do tomorrow. And then the Siyam at what was the schedule tomorrow?
Siyam 1 o'clock Mincha, and then right after Mincha.
Okay, Mincha 1 o'clock, and then the Siyam.
So we're having regular Seder 2 hours.
Regular Seder Hashem. I'll try to finish within an hour. I hope that we'll be able to finish within an hour. We might have to go. Okay. Okay, good to work. Yes,
Oh, wait.
Oh, yes, please.